Welcome back to Master Your Money Mindset 2.0, Brain Hacks for Ease, Abundance, Freedom, and Flow. I'm your host, Deborah Fryer, and I am super excited to welcome you back for another juicy interview all about how to hack your brain for more success and more ease. This is an interview series where we bring together creative, high-achieving, heart-centered entrepreneurs who are here to share their expertise with you, and you are here because you want to focus your mind on more success, ease, joy, and prosperity. So today I'm very excited to welcome our expert, Leah Lund. Leah is the creator of One Whole Health, and she calls herself a brain coach, a holistic health coach, and a neuronutrition therapist. And I'm super excited to get to pick Leah's brain about how do we feed our own brains for maximum ease and vitality and joy and success and abundance. Because our brain chemistry is really created by us, through us, and Leah's going to help us understand that more. So Leah's business is called One Whole Health. I just love that name. And she offers coaching and retreats to help ambitious people change their brain to stop overwhelm, anxiety, fear, self-doubt, and self-sabotage. And isn't that why we're all here? Because we'd like to experience less overwhelm, less anxiety, less fear, less self-doubt, and less self-sabotage. Leah has a unique brain makeover method, and she's going to be talking to us about that. She uses neuroscience and neuronutrition as the springboard to help you feel happy and confident and to find more freedom in your life. So I'm super excited to welcome you, and let's just jump in because I know that you have a lot to share.
Sounds good. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and yeah, let's dive in.
Yes. So first, I would love to know, what is neuronutrition? Because I think that may be a new term for a lot of people here.
Yes, it probably is. And neuronutrition is, as it sounds, it's nutrition for our brain. And our brain, when I use the term brain, we know now the brain is in multiple places inside of us. So it's not just the brain in our head, it's our gut brain, it's our heart brain. We're starting to see signs of neurons really all over the body, but we still refer to it as the brain. And so nutrition specifically for the brain that helps the brain form neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers that tell our body, regulate pretty much every system in the body. And so the other term that the audience here, the viewers, might be familiar with is amino acid therapy, because really amino acids are the key to the formation of neurotransmitters. And so we use it as a therapy in therapeutic doses through supplementation to help restore brain chemistry when it has become depleted.
This is so interesting. I just love this topic. One of the things that you just said, I just want to repeat just in case people missed it, or they're like, did I really hear that correctly? There are neurons all over the body. And one of the key places that I'm hearing that you're talking about is the gut, right? Because that's where we absorb our nutrition from. And that amino acids are the precursors to create neurotransmitters.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. And more the research is showing. There was a time that we thought, we knew serotonin especially was generated in the gut, but we're really seeing now it's all the neurotransmitters, that it's the bacteria in the gut that are generating these neurotransmitters. So again, we're still in the philosophy of calling that the brain, but yeah, the gut is our brain, and it's actually our most ancient brain.
Yeah, well, they call that our enteric nervous system, right? It's like a second nervous system. And it's so interesting, the whole field of the microbiome. I recently read that is now being considered another system in the body, just like cardiovascular system or respiratory system, that the microbiome is the 11th system that's now being taught.
Yes, and that brings so much into perspective, doesn't it? I mean, it really explains so many struggles in healing, but also why things happen in the body the way that they do it, and affect the brain the way that they do, affect things like mood that might seem more personality oriented than physical wellness oriented. We're seeing that connection so strongly now, which is exciting information.
Yeah, and it's also really exciting that we are very powerful in contributing to how we're going to feel. We're not just dependent on the external environment. So let's get into the internal environment. Amino acids are the precursors to the neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters create a certain feeling in our nervous system. So where do we go with that information? What is a neurotransmitter deficiency? And if we have one, how do we know we have one? And if we have one, what do we do to come back into alignment with that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So there are lots of different neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters I'll be talking about are really the amino acid neurotransmitters. And these are four categories of neurotransmitter that are largely responsible for how we feel. So everything from energy level to feeling happy versus angry or irritated to feeling calm to being able to handle stress, and then a whole host of physical benefits as well when you have a good flow of these chemicals, like being able to sleep well and have a good pain response and not have headaches and things like that. So these four beautiful chemical types are in ideal design. The way we're designed, we would create and produce an ample supply of molecules of these chemicals like serotonin readily, easily, so much so that we store excess molecules in reserve. And so I think of it as four little gas tanks of reserve. You know, I've got my serotonin reserve and my GABA reserve and my endorphin reserve and the catecholamine group, which includes things like dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine. And however, when we get behind in the production, or something's interfering with the production, or we're not producing enough molecules fast enough, we dip into the reserve. And so especially if there's something new or stressful going on, and stress, of course, is partially perceived. I actually say 99% perceived that stress is really how we think about things. But then there's real stresses too, like an infection in our body, or blood sugar imbalance, or an injury, an accident, you know, something that's physically happening. If we're not producing a good flow of these neurotransmitters readily and easily, then when something out of the ordinary happens and it requires us to draw upon our reserve, little by little, we deplete the reserve levels. And it's a bit of a synergistic effect in that the more you have in reserve, the easier it is to release some. So as you get down third tank, to put it really simply, third tank, half tank, or, you know, 2/3 tank, half tank, third tank, it just gets harder and harder to release it when you need it. And that's where, and maybe somebody listening would relate to this, where something will now cause you to be more stressed, and that exact same situation, whatever it is, a year ago, 2 years ago, oh, it seems like a big deal and it seems very stressful. And it's really that the coping chemicals you're struggling to keep up, and to have the coping chemicals to be able to manage the stress.
So you talked about how we create the neurotransmitters that we need when we need them, and then they're in reserve. How do you create them? This is actually a two-part question. So I'll ask you first, how do we create them? What could we eat, or what could we think, or what do we need to fuel ourselves with, whether it's a thought or an actual food or a supplement that will create what we need? And then the second question, which I'll return to, is, so where do the reserves get stored, and what do we do when they're low?
And what do we do when they're low? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the perfect design of the body, and I do believe that the brain and the body are just a miracle biocomputer. And by design, when everything's going as it should, there's a reason for everything. And so the way it should work is that our food supply would give us an ample supply of the amino acids from our protein, because that's what amino acids are, building blocks of protein, plus the cofactor vitamins and minerals that help generate the neurotransmitter. So in an ideal world, we'd get it all from our food, and that would be it, and that would be enough. And if we didn't have so much stress in our lives, and if our food supply was not affected like it is, not tainted like it is in a lot of cases, even organic and things, it doesn't have the same amount of amino acid. Grass-fed beef still doesn't have the same amino acid content in what it once did. So if that wasn't compromised and it was ideal, the food would be more than enough, and we would be happy and resilient and able to stress just simply from eating good amounts of protein. good amounts of good fats, and a variety of nutrients and antioxidants from the vegetables and the fruits. Unfortunately, for lots of different reasons, that's not what happens. And so when somebody becomes depleted, and what I see is it's usually one of two things. It's either that there's been one major traumatic event that just really zapped all of the reserves for someone, and that could be physical, an injury, or it could be something like a tough divorce or the loss of a parent, but some I often see that people can track it back to everything was good up until this happened, and then I just didn't feel as happy, and I couldn't get myself to bounce back, and we can trace it back to an event. For others, it's more of a ongoing, the stress of life, the stress of life, the stress of life, the stress of life, and then it's like the tipping point, and it goes over the top. And so once you get to that point where there's some depletion, even if, and then this is going to bring up a whole conversation about cravings, because that's one of the symptoms of the depletion, but even if you could commit to eating everything that you should and not eating the things that sabotage brain chemistry, like sugar, caffeines, alcohol, white flour products, dairy in some cases. So even if you could commit to that kind of diet, it probably wouldn't be enough to replenish once you become depleted. In other words, you couldn't eat enough really to get the therapeutic dose of the amino acids. So that's why where the neuronutrition comes in, that we supplement amino acids in very high concentrated therapeutic levels. But the great news here is for a matter of months. For a matter of months, and you can get your brain back to producing the neurotransmitters and having an excess and storing them up in reserve, and you literally do fill up the tank. So the neuronutrition is for, on average, I see my clients needing 5 or 6 months of their protocol. If there's been a serious addiction of some kind, maybe, or an eating disorder, sometimes it takes a little longer, maybe to a year. But for the most part, 5 or 6 months of the supplementation and then restored. And as long as everything, here's the catch, as long as everything external stays the same, which when does life ever stay the same, right? But in theory, as long as everything is maintained, your stress level stays about the same, you keep eating good quantities of protein and eating healthy and keeping out the foods that sabotage and getting good sleep and getting exercise and getting vitamin D, you truly are repaired and restored. So you can see it's very different from, say, an antidepressant for anxiety, because this does fix the problem. This heals the problem.
So can we talk about how thoughts create neurochemistry in the body? Because we're all very familiar with, you eat a certain food and you get a buzz from sugar, or you get a kind of high from caffeine, or whatever it is, or you feel really sluggish if you eat a very heavy meal late at night. But our own thought process is also releasing brain chemistry, right?
It really is. Yeah. And on a very simple level, how I explain it is that the brain is a mechanism. So the brain follows the direction of the mind. Whatever the mind tells it, the brain will respond accordingly, and it will produce chemicals that make you feel good and happy and positive, or it will produce chemicals that make you feel stressed and adrenaline kind of chemicals, where you're kind of stimulated and anxious. And so the mind is a big part of this. And it's why it can't be, and I get asked this oftentimes, well, can the supplementation just sort of fix it all? And no, because you could certainly think yourself back into being stressed and into depleting your brain chemistry again. So there's a very specific order to how we do things at One Whole Health. It starts with healing the brain chemistry with supplementation, so that then we can shift into lifestyle. So those pieces are in place. And then the mindset work is critical, or it'll be a circle, and you'll think your way back into stress again. So your brain believes what you think. And I like to share that you are the leader of both. There's brain and there's mind. You are connected with higher power. You are a spiritual being. You are a multifaceted. You're the body, you're the brain, you're the mind, and you're above it all. And so you really can lead your mind through series of exercises. And I know you teach all these kind of brain hacks too, that direct the brain that you're happy. Sometimes even as simple as putting a pen or a pencil in your mouth. Just literally by turning up the corners. Exactly. Turning up the corners of your mouth sends a message to the brain that you're happy. I'm a laughter yoga leader. And what that means is we get together and we laugh on purpose for absolutely no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's telling jokes. I'm not a comedian or anything, but we just intentionally go about the act of laughing, because by doing that, the brain becomes happy. So we're not laughing because we're happy. We're happy because we're laughing. So it totally flips, and it shows the power, really, how empowered you are to help your brain be happy.
It's so important what you just said, that we are the leaders. We're really in control of how we're going to feel. I love that you brought laughter yoga into the conversation, because it's so easy to laugh at things. I've read statistics that show how many times kids laugh versus how many times grown-ups do. Grown-ups, right? And kids laugh so much more, and it's so health affirming, it's so life affirming to laugh. One of the things that I read recently about why laughter yoga is so powerful is because it's actually moving our gut, it's moving our digestive organs, and that movement down there helps to release the serotonin and the dopamine in the gut. So I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's free. It's accessible. I like to share with my clients to, even when you open your email in the morning and there's 5,000 emails and you get that stress feeling, literally look at the screen, at the emails, and laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And it just laugh about the things that otherwise would really bring you stress, or even make you cry. And it's not that we're never laughing at anyone. So in a laughter yoga class, somebody might share something that they're going through that's really painful, and then the whole group will laugh, and it's not laughing at them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's cathartically breathing it out.
Yeah, that's another thing laughter does,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It
the
helps
breath.
regulate our breathing.
Yes.
So while we're talking now about neurotransmitters and how they create brain chemistry for us, whether you're going to manage your brain chemistry through food, which is one way, through laughter, which is another way, through your thoughts, which is another way. And so talk to us about how our brain chemistry actually affects our level of ease, and it affects our immune system, which affects our level of ease. Because that's such an
Yes.
important piece of whole health, is being at ease with who we are.
It it is, and that's such a great question, because I want everybody right here listening to just think about those words, and what would it feel like to live your life completely at ease, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what came up externally, to be at ease with it. And so part of that is specific chemicals, like the GABA chemical, for example, neutralizes adrenaline. So that helps us. Our adrenaline levels will rise even over excitement. They'll rise over stress, but they'll rise over excitement, anything unfamiliar. And
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline is part of our coping skill to be ready to run, ready to think, ready to move. However, if we're in a high adrenaline state all the time, then that's very unrestful. That's very restless,
Mm-hmm.
and there's energy and nowhere for it to go, and it's a nervous kind of feeling. And so the feedback loop is that GABA would then be released to bring down the adrenaline again. So biochemically, GABA, for example, is a really important one. Serotonin for the feeling of positivity. When we have good serotonin levels, we literally can laugh at ourselves. We can have a good attitude even when things are happening that aren't really what we'd want to have happening, or are a mistake, quote unquote, or I don't really use the word failure, but the tough things in life, if we can still find the humor in it.
Mm-hmm.
Endorphin being both our painkiller and our pleasure chemical. One of my mentors in neuronutrition speaks of a time when her grandmother was in the hospital, and just what great endorphin levels she had very naturally, so much so that here she was pretty much on her deathbed, in extreme pain. And the doctor came in to speak with her and said, I'd really love to give you morphine for your pain, but we need to do some lab tests, and we can't have that morphine in your system while we do the lab tests. So it's going to be another hour until we can give you some morphine. And the doctor left the room, and her grandma turned to her and said, "Isn't he the nicest man?"
Oh, wow.
And that was her really high endorphin levels, that it was just, I call it the hippie neurotransmitter, because it's, peace and love and everything is okay. So
Uh-huh.
that kind of ease comes with a good flow of these chemicals.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, that's such a powerful story, because somebody is able to override a pain signal with her own internally created brain chemistry. That's an
Yeah.
amazing story.
Yeah, and that was a combination of the high quality protein from, you know, her age, her generation,
Hmm.
not eating the packaged foods and things, but also having a simpler lifestyle. And it's not that 100 years ago, it's not that there weren't stressful things. There were very real um, physical stresses, especially. I mean, things were physically very hard 100
Hmm.
years ago.
Yeah.
But we had the intensity and the relief, the intensity and the relief,
Hmm.
heightened levels of cortisol and adrenaline, and then back to neutral. As opposed to now, because so much of our stress is coming from our mind, it's constant. We're at a high elevated cortisol level way too often.
Hmm. What you just said, you just dropped a little pearl in there, which was that when we go from intensity to relief, that is the natural state, right? It's the way the heart is beating. It's the way our breath comes in and goes. We eat a meal, we release a meal. And if we can bring this into our mindset of intense periods of work, or even intense periods of self-doubt and self-judgment and overwhelm, and intense periods of procrastination, we all go through that, especially we entrepreneurs go through that as we are in our businesses and growing and up level. We're just working with a bigger pie. So, our desire to procrastinate gets bigger, our feeling of overwhelm gets bigger. And that means that we're also getting bigger moments of ease, right? Because if this is the cycle of intensity and then recovery, we're experiencing more intensity. And as long as we can schedule in or create deliberately intense periods of recovery, we're still achieving a natural balance in the system. That's what I'm hearing you
Yes.
say.
Yes, that's and that was a really incredible summary of it. And it's exactly, it has to be, I think, a strategy in our modern world, and especially for entrepreneurs, because there are few boundaries, right? As an entrepreneur, you could work around the clock
Hmm.
if you chose to, and it's essential to schedule that time for yourself. So something that I recommend is, even every 90 minutes, with our rhythms, with our circadian rhythm, every 90 minutes, have a 10-minute break of some kind. Just get up, walk around, go outside if you can, put on some music, do something other than what it was you were concentrating on for
Yeah.
90 minutes. And then take that on the bigger scale of the week and make sure that there's a time block, 3 hours, maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday, that's also solitude. That's, I call it vitamin Leah. It's vitamin U, where you just go be with you and give yourself time to think. I love the story. James Taylor, the singer and
Hmm.
songwriter, James Taylor. I saw an interview with him once that he doesn't even begin to hear a song until he's been alone for 3 days.
Wow.
So if he had never been alone for 3 days, we would have no Fire and Rain. We all these classic, awesome songs. So imagine your creativity as an entrepreneur that can come from giving yourself the rest and recovery time.
Such great advice, and such longed for advice, right? So many people who are watching this right now, they work and they work and they work, and they think, if I just work harder or do more or show up more or do another email or do more. And Leah, what you're saying is, do less, take some time off. And actually that will result in more productivity when you do show up to do the work. When you give yourself a rest, it will actually revitalize you. So that's awesome. I have noticed that, and I don't know if it's cultural or if it is part of our biology, but it seems that women are more affected um, by stress than men, or women show it in a different way. Um, there are certainly some stereotypes that we cry more, that we get more hysterical. I don't really like to use that, but that is something in the cultural conversation, especially now. We're seeing that women, when we show our emotion, and we do get emotional when we feel overwhelmed or when we feel judged. You know, are women and men affected differently by neurotransmitters? What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely, and I'm so glad you asked this question. We know, so there's multi-factors as always. One thing is that women produce, even when there's a good flow of serotonin, it's still a third less than men.
Oh,
So we are at a deficit
hmm.
of the chemical that has us feeling positive and optimistic and confident and not doubting ourselves and not getting irritable and not getting angry. So we don't, the way I look at it, we don't have wiggle room. We have to
Wow.
have the really good protein and good sleep and sunshine and everything we possibly can do for our serotonin. Some time alone, some time with girlfriends, some time laughing. That is a very foundational piece for women. And then when you add on to it the mood fluctuations that can come if our hormones are imbalanced, and estrogen being a major precursor of serotonin too, it's all very, very related. So if we get depleted in estrogen and we're depleted in serotonin, it compounds the problem. And then there's the perspective as well of culturally, there's a lot of thinking that women have that is critical of self and needing to do for everyone else first before themselves, and looking for the things that give a release of, I've read about dopamine being the primary male chemical and oxytocin being the primary female chemical, meaning that's the chemical for each sex, when generally speaking, of course, that when we have a good flow of it, it feels the best. So in other words, men are looking for goal and achieve, goal and achieve, goal and achieve, because they get that dopamine. Focus on one thing. You know, they're really great at single point of focus and making it happen. Women are looking for the feeling of oxytocin, which is our love hormone.
Right. Bonding.
So we're bonding. We want bonding. We want to be loved. We want to be appreciated. And that can, as we know, get misguided sometimes in terms of where you go looking for that and where the sources are, and if it's not coming internally from yourself. So all these things do add up for women, where the message I would like to send out of that is that if you're taking care of yourself, if you're following the strategies we've been talking about here in this interview as a woman, think about your potential. Because you're already holding down a lot, right? You're getting a lot done. Every woman I know it gets a whole lot done in the world and is making a big impact. And imagine if you took care of yourself in this way and paid attention to these aspects of yourself. And especially if you're an entrepreneur, I wanted to come back and add that our research is showing 30% of entrepreneurs suffer from depression. And I don't know what percentage of that 30% is women, but I bet it's the majority. So it's, to me, non-negotiable. The self-care, taking care of your brain chemistry, getting your sleep, getting your solitude time, your every self-care in every way for women especially is non-negotiable.
Such an important point that you just made about self-care, because I'm tying that into what you just shared, that 30% of entrepreneurs are depressed. I hadn't heard that statistic. So I'm asking myself, well, why? I mean, why are entrepreneurs depressed?
Yeah.
And is it because they feel like we're not doing enough, we're overwhelmed, we're giving too much away, we're serving too many people, we're too busy? Like, what is it that is creating a feeling of depression in you if you are feeling that? And underneath of any of those things is this idea of, I'm not doing enough. Or I'm not enough. And if you can really shift your focus to self-care, eat right, exercise right, watch your mindset, laugh more, dance more, spend more time in nature, all the things that Leah shared, you will start to feel the enoughness that you already are. So I'm really struck by that statistic. Do you know what is the percentage of depression in the general population?
So in the general population, it's now slightly under that. We say 1 in 3, which of course would be, would be around a third. Yeah, but it's slightly less. And entrepreneurs oftentimes are healthier in other ways. Entrepreneurs tend to be very on health in general. This is something that's shifting, especially in the U.S., or this is from literature I've read in the US, that there's a good awareness of how to eat healthy, for example, with entrepreneurs. And yet there's still this depression. And so to answer your question of, is it mind? Is it how they're caring for themselves? I think it really is a lot of that, what you said, internal, whether are you enough and do you know you're enough? Because if you don't, being an entrepreneur will give you a reason pretty much every day to not think you're enough, right?
Right,
It's just
right.
it's the nature. I say there's no better way to learn about yourself than to become an entrepreneur, because every trigger you have will come up.
So
Every
true.
self-doubting thought you have will come up.
So true.
And so I think it's a huge piece of it is the am I enough? Am I good enough to do this?
Right. And then that really creates a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? Because if you think you're not good enough, you will start showing up in ways that you don't feel like you are enough, and you're not giving enough, and people will start to feel that, and that will really affect your income stream. It will affect your vitality. It will affect your self-confidence. So it's really such important terrain that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So I know that you have a super cool gift for people, which is um, this brain makeover method that you've designed. Do you want to talk a little bit about that so that our viewers can go in and dig in and do a little self-exploration about their own brain chemistry?
Sure. Yeah. So, what I am gifting the viewers here with is the exact assessment that I use with my clients to assess if you're depleted in your brain chemistry or not. And it's actually self scoring. So, you will know simply by your answers whether or not everything I've been sharing here applies to you. And what it is, it's 40 different symptoms that fall into those four different categories that I mentioned. And you'll rate each symptom on a scale of 1 to 10. And 10 being you feel that way, let's say anxiety, you feel that often and or intensely. A 1 would be hardly ever. And so there's 40 different symptoms, and simply by going through the process and going through the list, you will know what kinds of feelings and even um, physical feelings like headaches or TMJ, you'll know which of those are associated with neurotransmitter depletion, and therefore you'll be able to see how many symptoms you have in even 5 or higher, that really don't have to be. And that's my biggest message is you don't have to settle for that. This is not even things like procrastination. That's a low dopamine, low catecholamine symptom. So you don't have to assume it's a personality and you're just stuck being the way you are and that it's you. It's not. It's literally what's going on with brain chemistry. So it's self-scoring, and I invite you to take that. And you mentioned brain makeover method. Healing the brain chemistry is really step 1 of our brain makeover method. And so this assessment speaks specifically to that. You'll know if you have neurotransmitter depletion or not from going through that process of the assessment.
It's so cool. I just love this. And if you take the test and you discover that you are depleted, that you will have all of Leah's contact information somewhere on this page, and you can reach out and she can get you started on whatever supplementation will work for you. And everybody who's part of this interview series can help you with mindset. You've gotten a lot here. You can find laughter yoga, and you can plug into the stuff that Leah's doing, which is super juicy. So I want to thank you so much. I could talk for hours about this stuff because it's fascinating to me. And I want to respect your time and the time of our viewers. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing just a tip of the iceberg of what's possible for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Deborah. This has been great.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.